everybody. Steve Falconet here. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to kind of do two different subjects, from the ridiculous to the sublime, although the sublime could also fall into the ridiculous category. We shall see soon. Shag sent something over to me earlier about Charlie Brown. And it was a very, clever little comic strip sort of thing. But the question was, where is Charlie Brown on the change grid? And the cartoon basically says that as far as his future is concerned, he has a really strong intention. And then Lucy, I guess, says, well, and what are you doing about it? He goes, well, I have a really strong intention. And that's the comic strip. So where would Charlie Brown be on the change grid if he has a really strong intention to do something? Where would that be? Anybody, everybody, unmute, tell me, where is intention on the change grid?
So it's out grid.
It starts out grid. So this band right here is where the intention ring is. Now, the question would become, sorry, let me switch this. So he's right here in the world of intention. So the question now becomes, is he up grid, mid grid, or down grid? Well, when you hear a pattern of someone who says that they've got an intention placed and they've got another, oh, he just chatted over the link to the actual cartoon. I should just click on it and slide it in here so people can kind of go ahead and see it. Yes. Oh no, he's talking to Peppermint Patty. So you want to be a success, don't you, Charlie Brown? I guess so. Well, first you have to have the desire. Oh, I have the desire, all right. Next, you have to have the ability. And he says, oh, I have the desire, all right. So it's actually, where is desire on the change grid instead of intentionality? So what do you think? Where's Charlie Brown on his path to success? I have the desire.
Just no ability.
Right, doesn't have the ability, so he's here.
So I think he's upgrade a little bit.
I think he's upgrade. It's still the intention because obviously he's fully aware, or he's aware enough, and he's certainly not engaged. So he has to be somewhere in between, and that would be an intention kind of band, an upgrade intention. Although when I look at the comic strip, I wonder when she says, "You want to be a success, don't you, Charlie Brown?" And his response is, "I guess so."
Yeah.
So he might actually be a little bit more down grid about the whole thing. Like if it finds him, that's fine with him. And he does have a little bit of a desire, but that down grid desire, if you want to replace motivation, how do you describe motivation when you are down in, for the most part, that's power, apathy, and even
See, that lack of certainty in his response, wouldn't that push him more in grid?
well, tell us why are you thinking in grid? Tell us.
Well, only that particular statement of uncertainty, because to me that begins to imply and speak to his level of awareness.
Yep, I think that you're right there. And again, if I come down here, maybe it's barely in his awareness, because I guess if I'm going to go move in grid, that would still be a movement in grid from intention. Most of awareness is further in grid than
Right.
All of intention. So that I could certainly do. So she brought up an awareness. He made a rather feeble statement of intention. So I'm definitely feeling he's more down grid. Now, if your thought about in grid is because there might be some element of insecurity around it, that would definitely move it considerably in grid. Yeah. Now he could, of course, if I just go down here a little bit more, he could be on the amiable side of this awareness piece down here. If I'm in the down grid quadrant, there is, remember, an amiable, what would that be? An amiable analytical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there could be that element going on as well. Even then, that would still be a bit further down grid. Yeah, so that would be my assessment of it. But who knows? I really do make this stuff up as I go along. So hopefully that makes resonates. So we can say, oh no, we can build a case for that. Spontaneous though might be. So it really is just Patty. When did she get referred to as Peppermint Patty? Do you remember that, Shags?
Those are two different characters.
Oh, they are.
Sparky kind of shifted gears from Peanuts Begins later on, and the characters are more developed. And this one, Snoopy's still a very much a doggy dog.
A
So
dog,
those are a
dog,
human
right.
dog.
He's not the Red Baron yet.
He's not as anthropomorphized as
Right. And wasn't Peppermint Patty like the baseball player?
right.
And that's
Mhm.
different than this gal.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
This one had Patty and Violet,
Yeah,
Pigpen,
Lucy, of course, Schroeder.
Schroeder. Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Yeah. It is an interesting thing to think about for all of you that are on the call, because it does bring up the question, anytime you're going to try to create any kind of like an environment where a drama can unfold or a comedy can unfold, a story can be told, you have to think about, what is my combination of characters and in what ways are they different? And one of the ways you could certainly go about doing that is looking at a change grid and saying, like, well, among my characters, if I want to be able to tell rich, robust, realistic sorts of stories, I need somebody who's way expressive, and I need somebody who's really driven, and I need someone who's the brains of the bunch, and I need someone who's just as sweet can be. So we do this, and then we might want to give it more nuanced and say, like, oh, they're not just expressive, they've got a motivation that's going on. So you with me? If I could actually create 16 different characters in any kind of an environment where a story can be told, does that add to the richness of the possibilities of stories? I think the answer is yeah, definitely. Can you imagine if you were reading like a work of fiction, let's say a science fiction story, and every character is a deep analytical?
Hmm.
Is that all that watchable if it's a movie? Is that all that readable? Or are you going to kind of get just as bored as they are, just as downgrid as they are? It's like, no, you need someone to throw a monkey wrench into whatever is going on. There needs to be that conflict. There needs to be that the puzzles that are occurring. There needs to be interpersonal conflicts that are going on. And so otherwise, the story is just not going to be all that approachable. And similarly, if everyone's a driven driver, what's that story going to be like?
Yeah, those
Bill
people
Thorpe.
be
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. And then everyone's going to be dead except for one. And so, okay, fine, that all happened. Or if it's all amiables, it's like, no, we need diversity in the way that people are presenting themselves, the angles they're coming from. Even if we want to look at a higher level sort of an environment where stories are actually happening, we might say beyond people that represent these, there may be multiple cultures that are involved. And I think we see this a lot in science fiction, where there's the corporate culture, because very often it's not an individual that's the bad guy, it's a whole corporation that's the bad guy. And then, we have to come along with someone who's going to be the hero, and we have to have the whole army of people who can support that hero. And you get the whole, for a good drama, you need a lot of different energies that are involved. So it would actually be interesting to look at something that is as, what's my word? When I think about the Peanuts comic strips, I want to say that they are a lot more sophisticated than they appear to be on the surface. On the surface, they seem to be rather kid-friendly entertainment. I don't know that I agree that it's ever been targeted towards children, but I know that's who bought it. But you get the idea. I go, it would be interesting to see how Schultz arranged his character distribution, and then look at something like, oh, I don't know, what's a big classic? War and Peace, Dr. Zhivago. What else were really, really epic books? What's the one where Dostoevsky wrote, and it's all like takes years to read? I forget what it's called now. Don't mind me. But it'd be interesting to really figure out how are the characters distributed across the entire map we have here. War and Peace, that's what it said. Dostoevsky wrote War and Peace. Okay, anyway, thoughts, comments about that?
This is fascinating. I've been reading a lot about network effects and how they create that. stories that are behind it. But what's interesting to what you're talking about is the story can hit each one of these differently depending
Yeah.
on where they are.
Right. Who is the reader and what's the motivation of the writer? Is the writing, if I just read it, now you got to think about this too, particularly talking about articles or shorter things, not things that are going to be published in necessarily a book form. What's the goal of the writer? Is it to inform? Is it to somehow persuade? If it's persuading, is it trying to move a population upgrid, downgrid, ingrid, outgrid, midgrid? What's the real purpose of the book, or what's the real impact that they're hoping the book will have on the readers? And so that tells you that. By the way, if I said to you, with all of what we've just been talking about, understood, where on the change grid does a writer need to be to even craft such a thing?
I would say in the center, because
Yeah.
they have to be kind of detached and seeing multiple perspectives, or at least be interested in that, I would think.
What kind of book are they writing?
Something perhaps inspirational.
Okay. So if they're writing inspirational, then they have a motivation, right?
Hmm?
The motive is to inspire. Why else
Right.
would they be writing the book?
To appeal to get the story to appeal to people, to move people, get them into to buy into or enroll in the story. That's
Okay.
what
All
a
right.
good story kind of does. At least for me, it does.
Yeah. Okay. I can ask you a few more, but what I'm trying to get to is to decide how much of a great writer's energy, if you will, this detached,
Mm,
or is it really a very calculating kind of thing, and they need to be out here between I don't know, driven analytical driver, probably anywhere around here could very well be a
hmm.
good space, because if I know what I'm trying to accomplish and I'm building the book around what I'm trying to accomplish instead of just throwing caution to the wind and hoping for the best outcome, this is a highly analytical task that needs to be done. We need to actually map out the characters and the characters' relationships before we start writing any dialogue, creating any scenarios. Who are these people and what are the relationship dynamics between them? Someone has to figure that all out. And so that's
Right.
what I'm going, like, there's a lot of analytical energy that's going to come into play.
So let
Now,
me ask this then. I just read about the director that did Oppenheimer.
yeah,
And one of the things that he said in a couple of his interviews, that it was the same pattern of how he go about things. He kind of let go of the purpose. So in other words, someone gave him some things to read, and he just kind of dissected it. It shaped into a purpose, but he didn't have the purpose initially. So what he was articulating is that he let go of the purpose initially, but kind
yeah.
of the purpose is to format a purpose.
Well, and
So
that
he
makes
kind of
sense
started
because,
out like letting go, and then he shaped the purpose, if that makes sense.
no, it makes total sense because, we have to assume that that director, until this thought about Oppenheimer first occurred to him, he had not been someone who had devoted his life to studying Oppenheimer and the whole dynamic of the story and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It wasn't something he'd really devoted a lot of time to. So I would think that might have even been premature, counterproductive, whatever, to come into it with already decided outcome in mind. That's what people who write fiction do. But when you're trying to tell the story of something that's historical, and you want to get most of it right, I get it. You're trying to also tell an interesting story, but you would like to say, I don't really know what the story is going to be until I get deeper into the research, and then we'll let the story tell itself.
Mhm.
Now that's probably more like what someone who's doing I've not seen the movie, so I don't know. Is it more of a drama story being told, or is it more of a documentary? I don't know. Has anybody on the call seen it?
I haven't seen it. I just heard
Yeah.
about it, and it was nominated for a lot. I don't know if it actually
Oh yeah.
won,
Yeah. I
but I
think,
thought that was interesting because it kind of sounds like he moved from that detachment to where you're talking about now. So I don't know
yeah,
if
I would
that's
hope
kind of
so.
a natural,
Yeah, I would hope that as they were
yeah.
doing, you know, the development begins long before casting happens or anything like that. So they have to have that screenplay. They have to have that story. If they're trying to attract any kind of top named actors, the actor wants to see the script. And so
Hmm.
all that's happened beforehand. But that's what I think you're actually saying is that he said, I don't know enough about the subject to really know what the story is. And
Hmm.
so let's let the story reveal itself as time goes on. I think that's a really solid way to write something that is supposed to be based in a documented history. On
Mm.
the other hand, let's say that he just wanted to set a drama that was happening during that whole Oppenheimer thing. So to take the emphasis off of Oppenheimer and all that subject matter, and now simply tell a story of a love story of two people who were in their relationship development while this whole thing was happening. Let one of them be in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Let one of them be an American, you know, soldier or whatever. You guys get the idea? I could
Hmm.
create a drama and set it in that time period. Um, and now I get to decide as I'm writing the story what I want the outcome to be.
Hmm.
You know, so do I want her to survive? Do I want her to die? Do I want her to survive for a while and then die from the lingering effects of radiation poisoning? You know, is it going to be a comedy? I mean, I get to steer it because now I'm selling something or I'm developing something that's all made up. Yeah. All right, that was probably a lot more information than anybody cared to have, but there you go. So at some point, if you guys would like, we can certainly take any kind of work, literary work, and it can be as I don't know what the word is, as magical as a cartoon strip, or it can be as you know, real as any movie you've ever loved. So we could
What
actually,
about biographies?
well,
Like a
a
really good
biography.
biography.
When I think of a biography, if I'm reading a book about it, I think the person is just trying to do the research and tell the story of what the research is sharing. If that's the case, this is a very analytical thing. Now, I'm sure they want to make it engaging. So maybe there's a little bit of an expressive analytical energy being brought in there just because they, you know, they understand they want someone to finish reading the book. It needs to have something that we can connect to at a heart level. So Linda loves reading I don't want to call them political biographies, but it seems like most of the biographies Linda has read in my memory had something to do, people had some role in the political sphere. Linda, you can unmute and chime in whatever you want on this.
Yeah, they're just history, mainly
Hmm.
history, but they are political.
Yeah, but it was like, what was Obama's book? You read that one. You read something about Roosevelt.
I read Roosevelt. I've been reading for several years, but The Nations, the book on nations and how the United States was settled was fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love history.
And so I would say, to Brian's point, those kinds of books, we're more interested in what we're reading being accurate, you know, well researched, whatever the case may be. The writer does have to present it in a way that's engaging. So, you know, to keep us involved. So I do think it's still primarily an analytical activity with maybe some expressive energy thrown in there. Now, by the way, when you're writing a book like that, you may very well have a team of researchers. The researchers can be analyticals. Maybe if I'm saying to one of my team members, I need to find some dirt, well, then maybe I need a driven analytical to be more of the detective and go and find the story behind the story, the untold story, you know, whatever's going on. And so, I still think it's going to be primarily an analytical energy because you're talking about something that is so strongly connected to history.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the desire to tell the truth. At the other, again, if the characters are fictional, whether they choose to set it in a fictional environment or they want to set it in a historical environment, you're still watching a story of fiction. Yeah, and we've read a lot of those things, historical fiction. So, you know, a lot of good TV shows are historical fictions. Yeah.
Interesting. What about
Somewhat
like the
right.
Harry Potter series or something like that? That was quite
That's now the Harry
popular.
Potter. It's interesting that when you look at Harry Potter, or when you look at a lot of those really epic science fiction pieces, so and fantasy pieces like Lord of the Rings, is probably the biggest one that comes up for me as I think about this. But now you have writers that may very well have had an underlying agenda. So, for example, I don't know how many of you are fans of the Narnia series of books. But long ago, there was a series of books all about Narnia and Aslan, who is the king of Narnia. And it was written by, just a second, famous theologian someone real quick, look up who wrote Narnia. Who wrote Narnia? C.S. Lewis. Okay, so C.S.
Oh,
Lewis. Yeah, so C.S. Lewis, and I think there's 9 books.
Ah, you beat me
if I'm
to it.
not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken. Well, yeah, go ahead, Shags. Were you saying something?
I said you beat me to it.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, C.S. Lewis. And so when I was in college, I took a special class in literature. We could do all these independent studies. And so I wanted to do an independent study on the Chronicles of Narnia. And what my professor told me to do was I needed to read the books 3 ways, 3 times, and 3 different orders. The first was the order in which the books were actually written and released. The second is in the chronological order within Narnia itself, within Narnia's evolution. So you kind of like, even in Star Wars, you enter in the middle of the story. And so they want to tell you some stuff that happened beforehand, and then another book they'll tell you about something that happened in the future, and blah, blah, blah. And so you can actually read the books in the order that would parallel the timeline of Narnia in that particular case. It's a very different story when you read it that way, and you see and understand very different things. And then the last thing that my professor said is that, and now I want you to read them in the order in which the 9 books parallel the story of the Bible. And because you do have this character Aslan, who is a lion that everyone reveres and all this kind of stuff, and he is sacrificed, puts himself up for sacrifice, and a few days later he reappears. And so there are strong parallels between the Chronicles of Narnia and stories as they're told in the Bible. So you read them in these 3 different orders, and 3 very different stories come out of it. So I'm saying all that just to say he had to know that he was wanted to do that before he even started writing anything. So is it purely a creative work of fiction, or is it really something that is supposed to parallel a story of what's going on in the world or in life as we're, experiencing it, or in his particular case, still parallel the Bible? So religion. In fact, one of his points was that if humanity was to disappear, and the only thing that would be left would be our books. And aliens found both the Bible and the Chronicles of Narnia. Which one would they think is actually the one we believed in? I mean, it's that well crafted. It's that well structured. So, anywho,
that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't know. But nevertheless, it was something that we needed to do. So he wasn't trying to write something that was purely a work of fiction. He was trying to tell a story of a historical story in a parallel kind of thing. There's a word for that. What is the word? When you're trying to tell the story again in a different way. What is the word in English for that? Okay, wait, it'll come to me. Now, recently, Linda and I saw a movie that basically did the same thing. So how many of you have seen the movie Don't Look Up? Don't Look Up. Okay, Don't Look Up.
Of it.
Yeah, Don't Look Up is on Netflix.
Not yet.
Yeah, Netflix. It's a great movie, and give it more than 15 minutes. It's rough at the beginning, but then it gets really good. But anyway, as you watch it, you go like, yeah, it's telling me the standalone story, and someone could have just written it as a standalone story. But then you kind of go, no, this is actually, what is the word I'm looking for? It is actually telling us the story of global warming and what's going to come our way and all that. So parable, is that might what it be? I don't know. Anyway, so it's really interesting. You go like, well, did they just write this work of fiction, or no? Did the author say we need to make a movie about global warming, about climate change, and we need to be able to make our points in a way that the audience can actually feel what the outcome is going to be, without hitting them over the head with the climate change, sledgehammer. So instead, they created this movie and they brought in everybody and their brother. When you see the lineup of the cast of this, it's got Meryl Streep and Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. And then all these secondary characters are also famous people. Like all these famous people wanted to be in this movie for something beyond a paycheck. And but it's really an interesting kind of a thing. So very long answer to a very short question, but Brian, even if it's fiction, you have to wonder, is it totally clean fiction right out of somebody's mind, or is it something that's just a clever retelling of a story or a situation that's happening today?
Yeah, I think that's what's fascinating to me. I'm never into that kind of thing. I'm more like Linda. I read biographies of people who made us think and reshaped history. But I'm fascinated with Harry Potter's and Narnia's, how they evolved the story over time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That to me takes a skill.
Brian,
Yes.
you will think when you watch this movie.
Mm.
Because on so many levels, it's funny, yet it's serious. And you really think. And I was going to say earlier to your comment about it all depends on the people that are watching.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go see Barbie. And I asked a girlfriend and she said, no, Barbie, that's awful. She hadn't seen it. Another girl said another very negative thing about it, in a different way, but she'd never seen it. So I thought I'm going to go see it for myself. And T and I looked up an article about it, and you will think. The bottom line is it's a very thought-provoking movie, and it's
All right,
not
I'll go with Karen.
anything anybody thinks it's about.
Right. And I think that's one of those things that got caught up in media, right? Because I even seen people burning dolls and stuff. Like,
Well,
what
right.
is going on?
Yeah. Well, because somehow or another it's being politicized. But so Linda's going with a friend of hers tomorrow to see the movie, and I'm saying like, are you going to wear pink? I mean, come on, you should wear pink. Go. You got to believe if I'm there, I'm Ken, and my abs will be showing. So, anyway, but this again, another example of trying to find an interesting way to present a message that the buying public can, or the reading public, the buying public can actually absorb and relate to. So that it can have the effect that it's meant to have. But again, I go back to the thought that that would make Barbie far more of an analytic energy in the development of it and all that. Then it's just an expressive kind of thing. I don't think they set out to create a fun movie. I think they set out to create a movie with a message that happens to be fun.
Mm,
So,
mm,
yep.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So again, you better be able to look at the motivation. So there are a lot of players involved when it comes to tension management. What's the tension of the writer? What are the tensions of, oh, by the way, if that writer has to sell that to a publisher, then where is the energy of the publisher as far as that subject matter is concerned, or that author, or whatever the case may be. But in the story itself, you got to have a nice big range of different personality types so that you've got something on which to base interactions and, conflict in interactions.
And then T, just to add to that, you also have to be thinking about what are the levels of tension where people are watching it. And what I've found is that there's from way across the board different.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
And even what about the tension of the director itself? Because I think I read that Barbie is the first kind of major production movie with a female at the helm. And so
is
I'm
that right?
wondering, like,
Yeah.
that's what I've read. I don't know how true it is. So I'm wondering, like, what, you have a lot of fields that are dominated by men, right? So what kind of and tension was she experiencing to even put that
Right.
out there?
Well, I think we've even all seen the movies that demonstrate that Hollywood in its early days was about as misogynistic as you could get. So it would be interesting to see another breakthrough as far as getting into that whole world. Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, this has gone on a little bit longer than I thought it would, so I might save my other subject. I'm going to tell you what it is before we're done. But